Hey Vineyard, today's lecture is all about how to win an argument. So we're going to be looking at persuasive appeals, rhetorical strategies that help you win an argument. And the three rhetorical strategies that we're going to be focusing on today are logos, pathos, and ethos. So rhetoric is the art of speaking or writing effectively. And the main way to speak or write effectively, especially if you're trying to persuade somebody to see your point of view, is to utilize logos, pathos, and ethos. So these three terms, logos, pathos, and ethos, were first coined by Aristotle, the Greek philosopher. So over 2,000 years ago, Aristotle argued that there were three basic ways to persuade an audience that you were right. There were three ways to make someone see your point of view. And those three ways were logos, pathos, and ethos. So if we can incorporate these three strategies not only into our writing, but also into our critical reading arsenal, then we're going to better understand how editorial writers and news writers seek to persuade us. So understanding logos, pathos, and ethos will help you be a better and more critical reader, as you will learn when and how you are being influenced by writers. If you are aware of their techniques, of their strategies, of what they're trying to do, then you will be a much more critical reader. So this is going to help you be a more effective, thought-provoking writer as well, because you're going to know how and when you want to influence your audience to see your point of view. So here's an example, school uniforms. Suppose you are in favor of all public schools wearing uniforms. You probably aren't, but just say you are taking that stance. In order to convince the school board to instate uniforms, however, you would need to persuade them to do so. That's where logos, pathos, and ethos come in. So let's start with logos. Logos refers to logical arguments. So in our society, logic and rationality are highly valued, and this type of persuasive strategy is usually valued over appeals to the character of the speaker or to the emotions of the audience. When you think about logos, you're thinking about logic, but you're also thinking about data and evidence. Your argument needs data and evidence in order to be solid. If you don't have any evidence to back up your argument, then it will fall apart from the beginning. So when you think of logos, I really want you to think about the word evidence, data. What kind of logic are you using to back up what you are saying? So again, logical appeals rely on evidence, they rely on research, examples, and data, and all of this stuff is going to convince the reader of the truth or validity of an argument. If I see a bunch of statistics in support of an author's claim, I'm much more likely to believe that author than if they have no data or evidence to support their claim. So data, evidence, or logos provide a reasoned response and are usually most effective when the reader is expected to disagree with what is being asserted. If you're trying to prove someone wrong, then you better use evidence in your argument. So logos appeals are facts and statistics that give strong support for your reasons, because nobody can argue with facts and statistics. A fact, by definition, is true. So again, you're trying to convince that school board that your school should adopt school uniforms. You might cite this sort of a statistic. A recent survey shows that 61% of all students in this school and 86% of all their parents and guardians favor uniforms. If you were trying to convince the board to adopt school uniforms, that statistic would be a very compelling piece of evidence to do so. A little bit more about logos appeals. Logical reasoning is also effective because if the audience can agree that your claim makes sense, it becomes difficult to argue against it. So you might say something like, because uniforms are inexpensive, parents would save money by purchasing uniforms instead of trendy brand name clothing. While this isn't a data-based argument, it is a logic-based argument. So you're saying that if the school were to adopt uniforms, parents would save money. That's a great argument, and it's rooted in logos, logic. The next form of argumentation is called pathos, and these are emotional arguments. So while most of us think that we make our decisions based on rational thought, Aristotle, that Greek philosopher, points out that emotions such as anger, pity, and fear, and their opposites, powerfully influence our rational judgments. So sometimes emotions cloud our ability to look at logic or data or evidence, and they override our clear thinking. Sometimes appeals to people's emotions are more effective even than appeals to people's logic. So pathos appeals. Emotional appeals attempt to arouse the feelings, instincts, or biases of the reader. Pathos appeals are really common in advertising and fundraising letters. They're emotional appeals that often rely on what Herschel Gordon Lewis calls the 5 great motivators: fear, exclusivity, or the fear of missing out, guilt, greed, and anger. So emotional appeals are generally most effective when the reader is expected to agree with the argument. If you're trying to get somebody who already agrees with you to go along with your argument, then it's actually best to appeal to their emotions. But if you're trying to get somebody who disagrees with you to go along with your argument, then it's best to appeal to their logic. So pathos appeals are usually loaded with words that are heavy and emotional. They have these really emotional associations and connotations. So again, going back to that argument in favor of school uniforms, a pathos appeal might look something like this. Neat, attractive school uniforms promote feelings of mutual respect and equality among students who are judged by how they act rather than by their designer running shoes. So this would be an appeal to the emotions of the audience, of the school board. Basically, they're saying that you want students to not be judged by how they look. It's not an argument based in logic, but it does affect people's emotionality in some way. Pathos appeals often feature bandwagon appeal, which is the don't miss out or don't be the last person to have one appeal, often used by advertisers. You don't want to be the last person to get that new truck or that new car or that brand of toothpaste. So you might say something like to the school board, in this school district, all but 2 schools have voted to require uniforms for their students, meaning that all the other schools in this district already are having their students wear uniforms. So if our school isn't having students wear uniforms, then we're going to miss out. You don't want to miss out, and so this appeal can be very effective. Another form of pathos appeals are testimonials using celebrity endorsements to appeal to fans. So famous people who endorse a product or idea unrelated to their field of expertise are persuading by their means of their talent, glamour, and fame. So here's LeBron James, NBA MVP, and he says that wearing a school uniform had such a positive impact on him that he chose a profession that would allow him to continue wearing a uniform daily, right? So here's an appeal to emotions. Here's a really successful guy, LeBron James. He wore a school uniform, and he liked it so much that he chose a career where he would keep getting to wear a uniform. This is not a logic-based appeal at all, but at the same time, people love LeBron James, or a lot of people do. And so if they want to be like LeBron James, they might want to adopt school uniforms. The final component of persuasive argumentation is ethos. Ethos refers to ethical arguments. So Aristotle uses ethos to refer to the speaker's character as it appears to the audience. Aristotle says that if we believe that a speaker has good sense, good moral character, and goodwill, we are inclined to believe what that speaker says to us. So ethical appeals rely on the reader's sense of right and wrong. As Arthur Biddle points out in Writer to Writer, they depend on the writer's credibility. That's the key word I want you to focus on when you think about ethos, credibility. Credibility and reputation as a reliable, qualified, experienced, well-informed, and knowledgeable person whose opinions are believable because they are ethically sound. In other words, with ethical appeals, the audience is moved not only by what is said, but by who is saying it. So if you are giving a presentation in the medical field and you are a doctor, you automatically command some ethos because you have studied your entire life as a doctor. So again, ethos appeals refer to the speaker or writer's credibility. So speaker credibility is an ethos appeal that relies on experience, education, knowledge, and knowledge of the subject. So if you were to appeal to ethos to that school board, you might write, since we adopted uniforms 2 years ago, says Gene Jones, Kennedy High School's principal for the last 12 years, school morale has definitely improved. So, since this is the principal of this high school and she says that uniforms have worked so well, That's an ethos appeal. We trust this person. She has a lot of credibility. She's been working as an administrator for this long. And so if this person says it's a good idea, we should probably listen to them because they're very credible. So you might be wondering, well, how do I develop ethos when I'm just a high school writer? I'm not an expert in my field. The only way that you can develop your ethos is through your writing. If you have good grammar, if you have no misspellings, if you have good editing, then that's how you develop your ethos, through the sound of your voice in your writing. So ethical appeals speak to the reader's ethic or moral values, such as honesty, fairness, equality, good and evil, etc. So again, another ethical appeal to that school board might be, many people argue that school uniforms ensure students of all cultural backgrounds to have an equal opportunity to succeed in higher education, right? You're appealing to the school board's good nature. You want everyone to be successful. So that is how you persuade an audience to see your point of view. You utilize these three strategies: logos, ethos, and pathos. And these three strategies do work in conjunction with each other. They are the three sides of a triangle. So once you understand how to use these three strategies, your writing will become much more persuasive. And as we make our way through this unit and we look at persuasive articles, you're going to become very aware of how authors seek to persuade you. All right, Vineyard, have a lovely day.